Last week, what did we cover? Lying. Yeah, I even saw some people get on Facebook this past week, and they were like, well, I said something, and then I felt convicted because it was just a little white lie, but I had to watch myself because the sermon that was preached last week. That's good. That lets me know you were directed and the Holy Spirit's working on some stuff. So stop lying. But week one, we talked about lying, and we discovered ultimately that lying is something that really all it does is it separates us from the truth. Remember, we had the cross come out, and the cross is the letter T, and we said that that represented truth. You know, the Word of God, what it says about you, that's the actual truth. But oftentimes we want to believe our own truth, that we're not enough, we'll never be enough. And so what we do is, in order to cover the chasm between us and the cross, we lie more, thinking it will cover it, when in reality it pushes us further away. And this is the lie that the enemy makes us fall into. That's the trap. And before long, we don't just tell lies, we start living lies. That's what we talked about last week. And we said, ultimately, the closer we come to truth, the more we become like Christ. And according to John 8:32, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. You want the truth? You can't handle the truth. Anyway, so today I want to talk about anger. How many of you have a temper issue? Be honest. If not, we talked about lying last week. I'll go back and preach it again. Y'all know I will preach the same message 2 weeks in a row to make sure you got it. So we're talking about anger. Now, the thing with anger is oftentimes we try to justify anger. Yes? Yeah, okay. If the government hadn't have built that right there, I wouldn't have felt this way. We justify anger. We consider it something necessary to get by in life. We consider it a necessary sin. If she hadn't done this, I wouldn't have acted that way. Yes? Have you heard this before? Okay. If my child hadn't pooped in the bathtub, I wouldn't have. My son pooped in the bathtub this week. Yeah. I was giving him a bath, and next thing I know, I turn away for 2 seconds. I was still in the room with him, and I turn away, and I come back, and there's this. If my child had not done that, I would have not acted, so, or if they hadn't put their opinion on Facebook, I wouldn't have responded the way I did, which, boy, I am so glad that we had that talk. Anyway, let's get real at Encounter Church. If the umpire had made the right call, I'm talking to you, Encounter Church men's softball team. That's just, I'm calling you out. No, others of us will use the excuse, well, you know what? That's just how God made me. You've heard this, yes? Or what about, well, this is me, take it or leave it. Have you heard this? Well, or how about, well, I say what I mean and I mean what I say. You've heard this, yes? Okay. But today I want to get beyond the facade. I want to get beyond the justifications, the excuses, and I want to get down to the root of anger. Because we need to understand that not all anger leads to the wrong result. In fact, I want to point out that anger in and of itself is not a sin. Okay? I want to point that out. Because we could argue that there's two types of anger. There's sinful anger. There's I looked at Angel when I said that. But Angel is not sinful today. I'm sorry. She said amen, and I'm like, thank you, Lord, for Angel talking about. No, there's sinful anger, and there's righteous anger and righteous angel. And so Paul said this in Ephesians 4:26 through 27. Here's what he said when talking about this. Be angry and... Okay, so he separates right here anger from sin, okay? You can be angry and still not sin. Don't let the sun go down on your anger, okay? And do not give opportunity to the devil. If you look at that word opportunity, another version calls it a foothold, which is translated topos. In Greek, it means an opportunity, a location, or a room. What the Bible is telling us is don't give the devil a guest room in your heart. But I think a lot of times we have done this, right? Anger is not necessarily a bad thing. Again, I know it's the topic of today, but I want you to correlate here that anger in and of itself is not a sin. How do I know that? Jesus got angry. God gets angry. Okay, so anger is not a sin, but oftentimes it's what we do with that anger that leads us directly to sin. Okay? In fact, I want to talk about a biblical example of anger that led to sin. Now, this is out of Genesis chapter 4, involving two brothers, one by the name of Cain and the other by the name of... Okay. Context here, Cain made a bad offering and his offering got rejected by God. But let's read the whole story here. Genesis 4, we're going to go 1 through 11 right here. Now Adam knew his wife. That's the PG version of telling you that they came together and mated. And she conceived and bore Cain, saying, what many of you ladies said on your wedding day? I got a man. Okay, so she said, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. Verse 2. And again, she bore his brother Abel. So there's Adam and Eve. We know them. They had two children right now that we're talking about, Cain and Abel. Abel was a keeper of sheep, so he was a shepherd. And Cain was a worker of the ground. Okay, verse 3. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground. And Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and their fat portions. Now the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain, his offering, he had no regard. Why? Why did he honor Abel's offering and not Cain's? If you study it out, a lot of people believe that Cain brought rotten fruit as an offering. Okay? Whereas Abel, it says he brought the firstborn of his flock. A lot of people believe that Cain brought rotten fruit, so God said that's not acceptable to me. I say that to say when you come in here and you offer up something to Christ, you better make sure it's not rotten fruit. Okay? You follow me, because God's not going to bless that. That's what this story is telling us, all right? So Cain was very, what's the word? Angry, and his face fell. Verse 6, and the Lord said, why are you angry? Why did your face fall? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you don't do well, sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is contrary to you, but you must rule over it. This version says its desire is for you. Verse 8, Cain spoke to Abel, his brother, and when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel, and as a result of his anger, what did he do? He killed him. And then the Lord said to Cain, where is Abel your brother? And he said, I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? And the Lord said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground, and now because of this you're cursed, which has opened its mouth, the ground has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. I want to focus on two verses from that passage. It's verse 6 and 7. Go to Genesis 4, 6 and 7. Everybody with me? Okay. Here's what God said. Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast or fallen? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do what is wrong, so he's saying, you're angry. You have two choices. You can do what is, or you can do what is. If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do what is wrong, watch this, sin is literally, now look at the mental image this paints for you. Sin is crouching at your door, and its desire is to have you, but you must rule over it. It paints this picture to me that we have two choices. We can do what's right. We can be accepted. That's called righteous anger, okay? Or we can do what is wrong. And how many of you know the moment that you get angry, it's like sin is waiting right there for you to make one choice that it can jump all over you. And the Bible paints this picture for us. How many of you can relate to it, right? You have a situation and your initial response is anger. How many of you have been there? Me too. Are you the type of person who evaluates that anger and actually thinks before they speak or acts? Are you one of those people? Or do you just absolutely lash out against people? Now, the great thing about Encounter Church is we have some people who attend who are hot-headed at times, and I get to use you as sermon illustrations today. So, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do it. I've preached this before, but I want to recap it, this portion of it. You know, when it comes to anger, we have two types of people. And maybe this will sound familiar to some of you. There's the spewers, and there's the stewers. Now, just by the definition, you already know which one you are. I said spewer, and you raised, and you started pointing, and you, like, stewers and spewers. Spewers, what do? They rage. They express their anger. These are the people who were cussing out the umpire at the ball field during church league softball. No, well, hey, I didn't say you. If you got a guilty conscience, hold on. Or yelling at people in traffic. Or telling the people who pulled out in front of you that they're number one, right? You get mad and you have to let it out, right? I don't have to tell you that you're a spewer. You already know. And chances are everybody else in the church knows too, because we've been part of the collateral damage of your spewing. You know? And you may say, well, it's necessary because I feel better now. But what does the Bible say about it? Proverbs 29:11. Check this out. Check this out. Proverbs 29:11. A fool gives full vent to his spirits, to his anger, but a wise man quietly holds it back. Now, one thing I love about pastoring is I get to be very transparent from this stage with you about mistakes that I've made in my life. Not so that you can point at me and ridicule me, but so that you can learn from my mistakes, right? One of my favorite sayings is, I want my ceiling to be your floor. Like, I think that's a great, and so for me, I'm going to share some things, not so that you can be like, oh my God, and he's the pastor, like, so you can legitimately learn, okay? I was preparing for this, and I'm thinking to myself, when was the time that I just went off the rails in anger about something? How many of you have a time that you can think of like that? Yeah, okay. My first example, I found two. There's a whole lot more than that, but just two came to mind. My first one happened this week. I was putting together a slide for my son, not like a slide, like a playground slide. And so that my mother-in-law got him for his birthday. Pre-assembled slide. Of course, it was you need a rocket scientist degree. And if you know me, I am not good with tools, right? You know I'm telling the truth. Like, I can hammer, screwdriver. Beyond that, like, I'm calling Larry, yeah. Like, I'm just being honest, that's what I'm doing. So we're putting together a slide for my son, and Noah's excited, right? Because he sees the box, and big box, everything's big to him. Like, and so he's crawling all over me, and there's these teeny tiny little screws, right? And I'm trying to get these, and here comes Noah, like, and pushes me over. He picks up the slide and hits me with it, like, he's yelling, screaming, throwing stuff at, and like, I'm sitting there, and so finally, we had told him to sit down about 36 times. And I'm not exaggerating when I say about 36 times, because I know he's excited. And really, he's not doing anything wrong, but I'm getting aggravated. I'm getting mad. And so finally, I had enough. And when I have enough, I have enough. And so I go to get onto him, and I guess my anger kind of took over, because what I meant to come out was a civil, son, sit down. Well, it turned into like this demonic threat from hell that I was calling defects and he would never live it. Like, now, I don't usually get angry often. I really don't. But in that case, I gave full vent to my anger. And I'm going to be honest, I'm a bit ashamed. But it came out as me screaming at him. It did. Now, I'll be honest, I feel about that tall as soon as I realized what I had done. Like, it messed me up a little bit, especially when my son responded by saying, I'm sorry. Like, broke me a little bit. Yeah, broke me. And so I'm sitting, and literally in that moment, I thought to myself, God, help me to have patience with this little boy. And I think we can all, yeah, I know, I prayed it. I prayed it. I think we can all relate to situations like that, right? And not only that, but then I look over at Taylor, who's looking at me. And she looked at me like, if you say one more word, I'm going to fully vent my anger as well. And so, like, I felt bad. I really did. And, like, I apologized to my son. I did. I told him, son, I'm sorry. You deserve better than that. And it's true. But we let anger get the best of us, don't we? Okay, another example. Now, this is from a few years ago. Taylor was about 6-7 months pregnant with Noah. Okay. The house that we lived in, it was our first time owning a house, and so we lived off Jones Mill Circle. You may have heard this story. It rained really hard, about like it is right now. And the next morning, we woke up, and I'm looking over like, she's pregnant. Did she go to the restroom in the middle of the night? And it just like, no. There is this smell of sewage just all throughout the house. I mean, it is bad. Like, to the point that we did not stay in that house bad. And so I'm like, maybe our septic tank is full. We just bought the house. I don't really know what's going on here. We had an inspection. They didn't find any. I don't know. And so I did the only thing I knew to do. I called somebody who deals with septic tanks, and he opens and he's like, no, it doesn't need to be emptied. I don't know what the deal is. So I'm like, well, I don't know what else to do. So I start digging the line that goes from the septic tank to the house, right? Well, there is a line going from the septic tank to the house, and there's a line going from the house to the septic tank. There's just one problem. These lines are not connected. So every ounce of sewage, we had just bought the house, mind you. So it wasn't necessarily even our sewage is flowing into our yard. Now, the garden was great. Very good. But you understand, and I've got, you know, my pregnant wife who's like, if you don't fix that, I am not staying here. So I get a shovel, and I call my dad, and I had pictures that I thought about showing you, but I didn't. You're welcome. Oh, it's just us with the, but Yeah, I start digging, and this pipe is a little ways in the ground, right? Because I mean, they can't just put it on the surface of the ground. So we're digging, and we get to the pipe, and then we see the separation. It's like a 5-foot space, and I literally realized somebody had to do this intentionally, right? It's not like it wasn't busted. It was legitimately someone just didn't put a pipe from here to here, and so I'm getting a little frustrated because I'm trying to get the PVC glue and it's hot and there's flies and I'm knee deep in and so like and my dad's trying to be helpful, but I'm frustrated. And so before long, words start coming out of my mouth, right? And they're not, and I mean the whole neighborhood is hearing what I'm saying. It wasn't a quiet, well, bless God. No, it was not righteous anger, I'll put it that. It was, and so I'm saying, well, apparently our neighbor across the street was the mother of someone who attended our church, where I was the worship leader, right? And so she hears certain 4-letter words coming out of my mouth that are not fit for a worship leader. I told you I'm being transparent, and I mean I'm going. And so I show up to church that Sunday, and they were like, so I have to ask you a question. And I'm like, okay. Well, my mom is your neighbor, and immediately I knew exactly right where this was going. And I did something that Proverbs 14:7 tells us. Check out what this says. I read this, and I was like, that was me on that day. Proverbs 14:7 says, a quick-tempered person does foolish things. Would you agree? That's what I did that day. I can be a spewer at times, right? How many of you are spewers? Okay. The thing about you is you usually vent your anger, and you feel better when you do, correct? The problem is, what you don't notice is usually everyone around you. It might help you, but it certainly does not help them. In fact, you can cause a lot of collateral damage. So while you may feel better, now your children are afraid of you. Now your spouse doesn't want to talk to you. People from your job begin to disassociate themselves from you. Even people at church keep their distance because they don't want to be caught in the crossfire. Yes? What did my son do? He literally took this defensive stance, backed up on the couch. I'm sorry. He did the exact thing I'm talking about. I vented my anger, and it made me feel better, but it hurt him in the process. And that's the thing that you have to be careful of, spewers. It may make you feel better, but you are hurting people in the process. Okay? So when you vent your anger, it hurts. And God, how many of you know God's called us to be people of self-control? And that's really what it boils down to. So that's our spewers. Now there's another group of people, our stewers. How many of you would say, I'm a stewer? Okay, so if spewers let it all out, what do stewers do? You hold it all in, okay? You let it fester. It eats you alive until one day you go off on an 84-year-old lady in the grocery store who tried to get the last loaf of bread. That's who you are. And now you're on national news because you let it stew. Yeah? I've told this story before. Taylor was riding down the road with Noah. Noah was like 7 months old at this time. I'm guessing. He might have been 8, 9 months. He was not very old. And we put him in the car seat. I was not with her. She put him in the car seat. I was at work. And she decided she was going to go to Mama and Earl's, who live in Lake Wildwood. And at the time, we lived on Jones Mill Circle. So she puts him in the car. He begins to pitch a fit. She proceeds to pull out the driveway. He is still pitching a fit. She doesn't say anything. She just lets him scream. She turns right, and she goes down 18 all the way to where it intersects with 87. He does not stop pitching a fit the entire way there. She stops at the gas station, pulls over, tries to check on him, console him. He throws his bottle at her. He throws his sippy cup at her. He throws his pacifier at her, and he is not having it. So she shuts the door. She doesn't say anything. She gets in the car, and she just stews on it. She takes a left and goes down 87 towards Riverside. He continues screaming the entire time. She takes a right onto Bass Road, goes all the way down Bass Road. He's screaming the entire time. She takes a right onto Zebulon, goes all the way down Zebulon. He's screaming the entire time. She takes a left into the front gate of Lake Wildwood. He's still screaming the entire time. She has not yelled. What has she done? She's stewed the entire time. She finally gets to the front gate of Lake Wildwood, and she's thinking relief is in sight. I'll be at Mama and Earl's within 30 seconds. I can take him out. He'll stop screaming. There's just one problem. There's a guard shack at the front gate of Lake Wildwood where you have to scan in your card to be able to visit someone. Well, she's behind a few cars, and she's patiently waiting with Noah screaming the entire time. The first car goes, no problem. The second car goes, no problem. Now there's just two cars. There's the car in front of Taylor and Taylor. The car in front of Taylor decides to have a 10-minute conversation with the guard shack employee, while the entire time Noah is in the backseat of her car screaming, and she is stewing. She hasn't said anything. She's probably bitten her tongue in half, but she has not said anything. Well, then finally, the guard shack is like, okay, well, the guard shack employee's like, you're probably going to have to pull it. So they pull out of the way, and then Taylor pulls up, eyes just about to bulge out of her head, veins throbbing in her forehead and in her neck. Noah screaming in the back seat. And here's what the guard shack employee says. How are you today? She went from being a steward to quickly being a spewer. And she went off. I mean, she went off on this guard shack employee, to the point that she had to turn around once she left, go back and apologize. That's how bad she went off. It wasn't that Noah screamed one time. It was that he continued screaming, and as opposed to handling it, what did she do? She suppressed it until finally there was the straw that broke the camel's back. How are you today? She felt about like Psalms 32, verse 3. Here's what Psalms 32, verse 3 says. And I think you can relate. When I keep silent, my bones wasted away through my groaning all day long. Stewards, have you ever related to that verse? You have literally let something eat you alive in your mind. And you have fights just like the spewers. But the difference is stewards have fights in their head, because they suppress emotion, and your insides get twisted, it gets coiled all day long, and before long, you are just in knots. And so you have knockdown dragouts in your head. I'm guilty of this. Trust me, as a pastor, I'm more of a steward than I am a spewer. Because trust me, there have been times I've been upset with some of you, and I'm like, Jesus, give me strength, because I'm going to kill him. I'll have an entire conversation with someone that's not present in my mind while driving down the road. And when I finally do see that person, I'm ready to punch them in the face, and they don't even know what's wrong. Are you guilty of this? It's like when you have a dream of the person that you're in a relationship with, you know that dream, that they did something they shouldn't have done, and you wake up and you are so mad. Have you ever had that dream? Let's be honest. Okay. You wake up and you are mad as heck at them. And they're over there just, and you're like, I'm going to hit them with a bat in the middle of their sleep, right? You are so mad, and it festers on you. There's a parable in the New Testament about the prodigal son. We know this story, right? Yeah, everybody know the story of the prodigal son? Brief rundown, there's two sons, there's a dad, the dad's wealthy. The two sons get an inheritance. Well, the youngest son asks for his share early. He goes and he spends it on reckless living with women and alcohol, party, whatever it may have been. He loses all of his money. And of course, when his money runs out, his friends leave him. And he winds up in a pig's pen, eating the food that the pigs are eating. And he decides, you know what, even my father's servants live better than I do, so I'm going to go home in hopes that my father will hire me and I'll be able to eat. Well, his father sees him when he comes home from a long way off. He runs up, he embraces him, he puts a royal robe on him, he puts a ring on his finger, which means that the son now has authority again. They kill the fattened calf. There's a big, everybody knows this story, right? Okay. Usually that's where the story ends, right? I mean, when most people preach it, that's where, and the father loved the son in the end. Like, you know, well, there's another person in this story that we often leave out. The older brother, who didn't leave home and who didn't spend the money just recklessly. And so that brother stayed home. That brother did the right thing. But then he sees this jacked up brother come home and get all of this special treatment after being just a moron. Let's see what Scripture says in Luke 15:28. Here's how the older brother handled that. The brother was angry, and he refused to go into the house where they were going to throw a party. And his father came out, and he entreated him. Here's what the brother said. He said, I'm going to suppress that feeling. I'm mad. I'm not even going to go in there. How many of you, when you don't want to deal with people, that's the exact way that you handle it. I'm not even going to talk to them, right? I'm just going to suppress that feeling. And stewards, you may feel like that you're expressing self-control by not letting out those emotions, but what you're going to end up doing is messing yourself up so bad on the inside, and eventually you're going to go off on someone that doesn't deserve that anger in a way that a spewer can't imagine. Stewards are the people that walk into movie theaters with AR-15s and light up people that have nothing to do with their life because they were bullied as kids, and they stewed and they stewed, and it festered and it festered, and it was never handled. And before long, these are the people that you see on national stories because they didn't learn how to handle those emotions. They suppressed and they suppressed, but what goes in eventually will come out. Anger's dangerous. So my prayer today is that we can learn to correctly exercise anger to bring a better situation for everyone. Everybody with me? Okay, I know it's early. I know it's the 9:30. It's raining, but y'all seem to be pretty attentive. So 15 times in the Bible talks about anger using a metaphor. What would you guess the metaphor is? Fire. Okay? We've talked about fire before to express passion, right? We said fire can be good. It can keep you warm in the winter. It helps you cook. It boils water. But if that fire is misplaced, guess what? It'll hurt you. And we said the same fire that's in your fireplace keeping you warm at night will burn your house to the ground if it's in a place that it was not designated for. Can I tell you, anger is the same way. It has a good side. It has a bad side. Anger can cause a positive reaction or a negative reaction. Look at Proverbs 17:14. When we have issues with each other, the beginning of strife is like letting out water. So quit before the quarrel breaks out. Here's what this version says. Starting a quarrel is like breaching a dam. So drop the matter before a dispute breaks out. Now, it paints this picture of a dam. Now, I want you to imagine there's a little hole in the dam and water begins to just spew out. How much pressure is behind that? Intense pressure. Okay, if you don't believe me, go to the softball game, let an umpire make a call that is wrong, or even get the call right, because you've got parents. I'm not just talking about church. I'm talking about anybody. You've got parents that are upset. You've got kids that are upset. You've got teammates that are upset. And the pressure's intense. I can tell you because I've been in that situation before. It gets heated quickly. You ought to be in the dugout for some of these conversations. Like, you wearing that E logo, talking like that? And ultimately, does it amount to anything except a mad umpire, a mad softball team, and a crowd that's watching us saying, I thought this was church league. And I thought about visiting that church, but I'm kind of having second thoughts now. You know, instead, here's what we need to do. I know I'm picking on the softball team. I told them I was going to. But we did beat real life 23-9. Hey, okay, so instead we need to use that anger for the correct purposes. Because oftentimes people say, well, this is just how God made me. But can I tell you, that is not how God made you. You're driving and someone cuts you off. Have you ever thought before rolling down the window and making any hand gestures, have you ever stopped and just said, you know, I wonder what's going on in their life today? I remember being at the red light right there where you can cut across to go to the Coliseum. You know what I'm talking about? You can turn left, go to the Coliseum. And I'm coming this way. Well, I'm at the red light, and as soon as it turns green, there's 3 cars that pass me on all sides doing about 70 miles an hour. And I have my kid in the car with me. It's a red light. As soon as it turned green, they were going to run. And so my initial reaction is definite anger. My son is in the car with me, and he's only about 8 months old. So I did what anybody would do. I started tailgating them. I caught up to them as best as I could. And then I realized something in my frantic hurry to get up there to try to get even with them. Their emergency flashers were on. And then it made me think, well, I wonder what they're going through. And it made me have a change of heart until I saw that they were just in a hurry to get to Murphy's. But nonetheless, it still does not change the point that, have you ever thought that maybe your coworker that makes you so mad because she does not stop talking? Have you ever thought that perhaps she's the single mom of a 3-year-old and this is the only adult interaction she's going to get all day long? Have we ever stopped and really thought about this? How quickly we become angry with people without knowing the full situation. We get mad because that child is so disrespectful and and if I was his daddy, have you ever realized that maybe his father left him when he was 2? And so he didn't have that dad? Have we ever stopped to analyze the situation? Or do we just respond in anger? Because that's what we do. Because that's how God made us. Have you seen these things? Okay. Here's what James 1:19 says, and I want us to focus on this. Very important point. Very important point. Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. The next verse over here says, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Have you ever thought that maybe this is why God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth? Well, He made me that way. No, He didn't. I can't hide mine. I got my ears cut. They're out there today. Like, I have 2 big old ears and 1 big old mouth for a reason. Because I should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Did you know when you're slow to anger, you become more like God? Do you know 7 different books of the Bible say that God is slow to anger? It doesn't say He never gets angry, but it says He is slow to anger. So what do? How do we fix this? We have to learn to take that anger and point it in a positive direction. How? Well, as we said, there's sinful anger, which we've talked about up until this point, but there's also this thing called righteous anger. And this is the anger that we need to let burn brightly. This is the anger that you need to let it burn so much that you'll actually do something about it. You ever gotten in an argument with someone? Oh, I'm mad. And their response is, then do something about it. Okay? Okay. That's what I'm encouraging you to do here. Now, I don't mean go home and knock your brother's teeth. That's not what I'm saying. But we get mad at someone and we decide, I'm not going to take this anymore. And we actually do something about it. But what if we found a situation that made us so angry we decided to do something good to change it? Let's be honest, a lot of us come into church and we're angry at how the world is right now, right? Yep. Get mad enough to do something about it. People have come up to me and legitimately they're mad because we don't offer certain ministries. Well, we really should, and I just can't believe, do you know what my response to them is? Then start the ministry. Jesus goes into a synagogue on the Sabbath day. According to Jewish culture, you were not supposed to do anything on the Sabbath day. You don't work, you don't heal, you don't perform miracles, you don't do anything. So Jesus walks in and he sees these Pharisees and he knows good and well that they're trying to trick him, that they're trying to trap him. But he sees a man here with a withered hand. And so Jesus asked the Pharisees a question because the Pharisees wanted to see, is he actually going to heal him? Is he going to break the law? And so Jesus says something to the Pharisees. He says, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm? To save life or to kill? But they didn't say anything. And then he looks at them and he's angry at them because they were so concerned with the rules of the day and what the law said that they missed the opportunity to show compassion to a brother in need. And it made Jesus mad. It made him very mad because Jesus realized this entire system is broken. You've become so focused on rules and regulations that you've missed the gospel and what it's about anyway, which is loving your brother, having compassion, having mercy and grace and forgiveness. So Jesus says, stretch out your hand, and he heals the man's hand in anger. He got angry enough to do something positive. Now, as a result of it, the Pharisees went out, got with the Herodians. They ended up killing Jesus because he performed a miracle on the Sabbath, amongst many other things, the blasphemy, yes, I am the Son of God. You know the story of Easter, right? But in this moment, I want you to see that Jesus did something about his anger, and he did something beneficial. This is righteous anger. He healed the man. He was angry enough about the situation to actually do something positive. And I want to encourage you today that if you're going to get angry about something, get angry enough to actually do something. Now, don't take that out of context. I don't mean hit your wife. Okay? Don't you come to me and be like, I did what you said, Pastor. No, you did not. Okay. Can I give you some statistics in closing, if Trevor and Michaela will come up? Just some statistics to think about. You know there's 13,266 foster kids in Georgia today. 13,266 foster children in Georgia today. And Georgia's actually on the lower end of the spectrum. Imagine how many are in California. Imagine how many are in New York. Imagine how many are in places that are a lot bigger than we are. And can I tell you, if that makes you angry, then do something about it. You know, we've got a couple in our church right now. They are doing something about it. And they're looking to adopt. And I saw the kids just the other night at the ballpark. And that made me happy for them. Because they got angry enough to do something about it. You know, has your marriage been attacked by the enemy? Has it made you angry? Then do something about it. Because so often our sinful anger points us to fight with our spouse, but righteous anger points us to team up with our spouse and fight the enemy. There's a difference in the two. Are you tired of living paycheck to paycheck? Can I tell you, you're the only one that can get angry enough to actually do something about that? That's it. So many times we see anger as something that just happens, right? Well, God made me this way. He didn't. Then you have two choices when you get angry. The first choice is, if you do well, won't you be accepted? The second choice is, but if you don't, sin is crouching at your door. Its desire is to have you. But you've got to learn to rule over it. Amen? Stand on your feet with me today. I just want to